Hello everyone, my name is Mirhat Sharifjan and welcome to Eurasian-Express. As I promised, I'm going to share a story of my uncle Ghasarbek Nimatov today. That will be the third and last story I plan to share with you to give you the idea about what the Soviet Union was about. My uncle Ghasarbek's picture is on the cover page or cover of this presentation. He's holding me there. I am a less than 2 years old boy. The picture was taken in 1964, 20 years after the events I'm going to talk about today. There is hardly a family in Kazakhstan that does not have some story connected to the Chechens. The Chechens, an ethnic group, very well-known ethnic group in the North Caucasus. For generations, Kazakhs and Chechens lived side by side after hundreds of thousands of Chechens were deported to Kazakhstan by Josef Stalin in February 1944. Whole ethnic groups, Chechens, Volga Germans, Ingush, Meskhetian Turks, Crimean Tatars, Greeks, Kalmyks, Balkars, Koreans, and many others were deported after they were proclaimed by Stalin's regime as enemies who collaborated with Nazi Germany or Japan, and as I said, deported along with elderlies, women, and children, and in the train cars for cattle. And they were deported to Kazakhstan and other Central Asian republics in the 1940s. Many friendships were born during those difficult years. Many families still remember acts of kindness and acts of friendship that crossed ethnic and cultural boundaries. My own family has a story, and I'm going to talk about that story now. As a child, I was puzzled by something that seemed very impossible to explain. All of my uncles and aunts on my mother's side carried the surname Katiev. Only one uncle had a different surname. His name was Ghasarbek Nimatov. When I asked why, my parents and my aunts and uncles told me that his surname has been formed according to an old Kazakh tradition, taking his father's name, my grandfather Nigmatullah, as the family name. But something never made sense. Why Nimatov and not Nigmatullayev or Nigmatulin? Also, that tradition was usually applied to the eldest son. But my uncle Ghasarbek had an older brother, Rafiq Katiev. Why would only one son receive a completely different surname? No one explained. No one answered. It was an unanswered question I always had. Only after Uncle Ghasarbek died of cancer in 1989, my relatives finally told me what happened. It was a story that had remained hidden for more than 40 years. In September 1944, the Second World War was still going on. My grandmother Raisha had 6 children of her own and also raising 2 adopted children. Feeding 8 children in a poor Kazakh family in a Kazakh village during wartime was almost impossible. People survived on roasted grain. Sometimes they boiled the hides of animals that had been slaughtered many years ago, simply to make something edible. So when 15-year-old Razarbek received an opportunity to attend a so-called Fabrично-Zavodskoye обучение, or FZO, which can be translated as an industrial vocational school in the regional capital Ust-Kamenogorsk, also known as Oskemen, my grandmother decided to send him there. At least FZO system offered some food, offered clothing, like some kind of uniform, and perhaps a chance to escape hunger. After completing accelerated wartime training, Razarbek became a metal worker, or to be precise, he became a lathe operator. Soon he was manufacturing artillery shells for the Soviet front. Then, in the spring of 1945, he disappeared. Officials came from the city of Ust-Kamenogorsk to our village, very angry. They questioned my grandparents, Razarbek's parents. They were searching for Razarbek. They were threatening his parents, saying that they might be arrested if they're hiding him somewhere. They wanted to know whether Razarbek had returned home, but they couldn't find him. Then very soon the war ended. Victory celebrations began. Gradually, everybody stopped asking questions. 2 years later, Razarbek quietly returned to his village. But he was no longer Razarbek Katiev. He now carried a new surname, Nimatov. Even his birth records had been altered. Why? Because he had become, we can say that he had become a fugitive. While studying and working at the plant, the industrial facility in Ust-Kamenogorsk, Razarbek noticed something that deeply disturbed him. Nearby, just next door, next to the building of his industrial facility, behind fences and under guard, lived deported Chechen families. Like hundreds of thousands of other Chechens and Ingush, they had been forcibly removed from their homeland in the North Caucasus during Stalin's mass deportations in February 1944. Many of the Chechens suffered from hunger. Many lost relatives during the journey. Razarbek received bread as part of his daily food ration. But instead of eating it himself, he ate only the soup. Every day he secretly carried his bread to the commandant's area and passed it through a hole in the fence to hungry Chechens. He was only 15 years old boy, and he simply could not watch people starving. No one knows how long he managed to do this. Eventually, one day, someone caught him. He was interrogated. The investigators terrified the teenage boy. They told him that by helping enemies of the Soviet people, he himself had become an enemy. He was ordered to return to another interrogation 3 days later, but he never went back. Instead, he somehow made his way across eastern Kazakhstan region to his home village. My grandfather, Nigmatullah, his father, understood immediately what had happened. He hid his son with shepherds very far away on a remote seasonal pasture in the mountains, in the Altai Mountains, far from the village. Later, he somehow managed to arrange completely new identity documents for his son. I still don't know how he managed to do it. To do this, something like that during Soviet time was impossible, but he managed to do it. And I don't know how much bribe he had to pay or how many connections he used, Traditionally, Kazakhs, they very much respect their kinship and their relation by blood. Well, I think those relations were used as well. They were very important. And anyway, Nazarbek got a new surname. He got modified birth records. He got a new legal identity. Back then, it was probably the only way to save him from being arrested, or even to save his life. Remarkably, the authorities never came back. They never asked any questions. They never asked about him. So Nazarbek survived. Years later, he married and had 10 children. I often think about this story. Nazarbek was not a politician. He was not a soldier or a prominent and well-known dissident. He was just a boy. He was simply a 15-year-old Kazakh boy who believed that hungry people deserved bread. In Stalin's Soviet Union, even such a simple act of humanity could become a crime. I believe many Kazakh families have similar stories. Stories that were never written down. Stories whispered only inside the family. Stories of ordinary people who chose compassion over fear. These memories remind us that sometimes history is made by a single piece of bread passed through a hole in a fence. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, somehow affected you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and share it with others. Because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness and compassion leave the deepest mark on history. I also want to remind you that if you want to see how my uncle Nazarbek looked like, his picture holding me in 1964 was used by me to create this, the thumbnail, the cover page, or the cover of this video. So it was another story of my family that I promised to share with you so that you could understand somehow what the Soviet Union was about. Thank you very much for watching. It was Eurasian Express. See you next time. Bye-bye.